She left on a rainy Tuesday morning, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and years of disappointment. He thought that was the end. He was wrong. The house felt too quiet after Claire walked out. Ethan stood in the kitchen, staring at the half-empty coffee mug she had left on the counter. The steam had faded, but the echo of their last argument still clung to the walls. It wasn't a dramatic fight. No shattering plates. No raised voices. Just two people admitting they no longer recognized what they had built. Claire had simply whispered, "I can't do this anymore," grabbed a suitcase, and stepped into the rain. Ethan didn't chase her. Maybe he should have. Maybe silence had been their biggest problem. He moved through the house like a shadow. The living room looked the same, but without Claire's laughter, it felt hollow. He spent the next few hours pretending to work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her. How long had she been planning to leave? Had she really stopped loving him, or had he just failed to show her he still cared? By evening, the grief settled into something heavier. A quiet ache. A sense of being unmoored. He didn't expect anyone to knock on his door. When the doorbell rang, Ethan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and took a breath. Maybe Claire had returned. Maybe she had realized she had left too soon. But when he opened the door, it wasn't Claire. It was her mother. Margaret stood on the porch with her umbrella tucked under one arm, rain misting her grey coat. She looked tired, but her eyes held that familiar strength Ethan had always admired. She had never been the meddling type, but she had always been honest, sometimes painfully so. "Ethan," she said softly. "I heard." He stepped aside to let her in. She brushed past him with the same gentle grace she had always carried. She placed her umbrella by the door, then turned to study him. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said. "It's only been one," Ethan answered, managing a weak smile. Margaret nodded, as if she had expected that kind of answer. She walked into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. Ethan sat across from her, feeling strangely nervous. He wasn't sure why she had come. To blame him? To gather Claire's things? To close a chapter he wasn't ready to close? Instead, she said, "Ethan, I'm staying here for a while." He blinked. "What? Why?" "Because I know my daughter," Margaret said. "And I know you. And I refuse to let both of you walk through this alone." Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Margaret continued, her voice steady. "I'm not here to take sides. I'm here because families don't fall apart without a fight. And right now, you need someone in your corner." Her words cracked something inside him. Maybe it was the kindness. Maybe it was the reminder that he wasn't completely abandoned. "You don't have to do that," Ethan said quietly. "I know," she replied. "But I want to." For a moment, neither spoke. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The room felt less empty with Margaret here, as if her presence filled some of the space Claire had left behind. Margaret finally broke the silence. "Tell me what happened." Ethan took a long breath. "It wasn't one thing," he said. "It was everything we didn't say. Everything we avoided. Work got busy. Life got loud. We drifted. And yesterday, she just said she couldn't do it anymore." Margaret's eyes softened. "Did you tell her how you felt?" Ethan hesitated. "I thought she knew." "That's not the same as saying it." He looked down at his hands. "I guess not." Margaret leaned forward slightly. "Ethan, Claire loves deeply, but she's sensitive. When she feels unseen, she pulls back. Did she give up too quickly? Maybe. Did you fight hard enough? Maybe not. But this isn't over unless you both choose to end it." Her voice was calm, not accusing. Just honest. Ethan swallowed hard. "I don't know if she's coming back." Margaret nodded. "That's why I'm here. Sometimes people walk away because they're scared. Sometimes because they're hurt. But sometimes, they walk away hoping someone will finally run after them." Ethan's chest tightened. The idea that Claire hadn't truly wanted to leave offered a small spark of hope. Fragile, but real. Margaret stood and walked toward the window, staring at the street where her daughter had disappeared earlier. "Claire called me," she said softly. She didn't sound angry. Just lost. I didn't push her for details. I just told her I'd check on you. Ethan felt a faint warmth spread through him. Did she say where she was? No, Margaret said. But she'll reach out again. She always does. She turned back to him. In the meantime, you and I are going to take care of this house, and we're going to take care of each other. You don't have to face this alone. Ethan nodded slowly. Margaret's presence brought something he hadn't felt since morning, steadiness. Her voice, her calm, her unwavering sincerity, it grounded him. He hadn't realized how badly he needed someone to simply show up. That night, the house didn't feel so empty. Margaret cooked a simple dinner, chicken soup and biscuits. They ate quietly, but not uncomfortably. Afterward, she insisted he get some rest. He didn't argue. When he lay down, his thoughts drifted again to Claire. To the way she had looked at him during their last conversation, tired, distant, but not hateful. There had still been softness in her eyes. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe Claire hadn't walked away forever. He stared at the ceiling, the faint sound of rain easing his thoughts. The ache in his chest was still there, but it wasn't as sharp. Not with Margaret in the guest room down the hall. Not with the sense that something had shifted, even slightly. Still, one question lingered in the back of his mind, quiet but persistent. Why had Claire called her mother, and not him? He let the question settle as sleep finally pulled him under, unaware that Margaret was awake too, staring at her phone, reading a message from Claire that she hadn't yet shared. A message that could change everything. Margaret didn't sleep much that night. She lay awake in the dim guest room, clutching her phone and staring at the message Claire had sent only minutes after leaving Ethan's house. The same message she hadn't shown him. Not yet. Mom, please don't try to fix this. I don't know who I am anymore when I'm with him. It wasn't the kind of message a mother could ignore. And it wasn't one she could share lightly, especially not with someone already breaking. Morning came quietly. Soft golden stripes of sunlight crept across the hallway. Ethan was already in the kitchen when Margaret emerged, tying her grey hair into its usual neat bun. Morning, he said, his voice rough, but steadier than yesterday. Morning, she replied. He had made coffee, and the smell filled the kitchen with a warm comfort the house had lost the day before. Margaret accepted a cup, wrapping her hands around it. Did you sleep? She asked. A little, he said. Enough. His eyes told her otherwise, but she didn't push. They sat at the small table. The silence between them had changed, less of an emptiness and more of a quiet understanding. Ethan finally spoke. I keep thinking about all the things I should have said to her. Margaret nodded. Regret has a way of sounding louder after someone walks away. Ethan looked down at his hands again. Do you think she's okay? Margaret hesitated, choosing her words carefully. She's hurting. But yes. She's safe. He looked up sharply. Did she call you again? Margaret shook her head. No. But I know my daughter. She always needs space before she can talk. She's processing. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth. Ethan sighed and leaned back in his chair. I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix it, Margaret said gently. You rebuild it. Brick by brick. And you accept that it won't look the same as before. Her words hung between them. For a moment, Ethan looked like he might cry again. But he steadied himself, drawing a slow breath. I want to try, Margaret. Even if it takes forever. I just want her home. Margaret reached across the table and placed her hand on his. Then you'll have to show her. Not with grand gestures, but with consistency. Ethan nodded, absorbing each word like it was a lifeline. Before they could speak again, the doorbell rang. Ethan froze. Margaret's heartbeat quickened. Ethan slowly rose from the table and walked to the door. His hand hovered above the knob for a second, as if he needed to convince himself this moment was real. He opened the door. But it wasn't Claire. A man stood on the porch. Tall, dark hair, wearing a worn denim jacket. He looked familiar, vaguely. Ethan, the man asked. Yes. I'm Daniel, he said. Claire's co-worker. Ethan stiffened. Margaret watched from behind him, her eyes narrowing slightly. Daniel offered an awkward, apologetic smile. Sorry to show up like this. I just I heard what happened. I wanted to make sure she was okay. Ethan glanced at Margaret, unsure what to say. Claire's not here, Margaret said, stepping forward. Daniel nodded. Yeah. I figured. She didn't come into work today. Something flickered across Ethan's face, worry mixed with confusion. Did she say anything before she left yesterday? Daniel hesitated. She just seemed overwhelmed. A bit lost. The same word Claire had used in the message Margaret kept tucked away. Do you know where she might go? Ethan asked, voice tight. Daniel shook his head. No. I wish I did. A stretched silence followed. Margaret stepped slightly in front of Ethan, protective in a way only mothers could be. Thank you for checking, Daniel. We'll reach out if we hear from her. Daniel nodded and backed away. Please do. I care about her. We all do at the office. After he left, Ethan shut the door slowly. He turned to Margaret, frustration creeping into his expression. Why didn't she tell me any of this? Not work. Not any of it. Margaret softened. Because sometimes the person we love most becomes the hardest person to talk to. Ethan sank onto the couch. I feel like I'm losing pieces of her I didn't even realize she gave away. Margaret sat beside him. You're not losing her. She's finding herself. That's different. Ethan stared at the floor. And what if she finds herself in a place where I don't fit anymore? That question pierced Margaret's chest. Not because she thought it might be true, but because she saw the fear behind it, the fear of someone who had always tried to be steady, now terrified of standing alone. Before she could reassure him, Ethan's phone buzzed on the coffee table. They both looked at it. An unknown number. His breath caught as he picked it up. He answered quickly, voice trembling. Hello. Margaret leaned closer, instinctively listening without meaning to. Ethan swallowed hard. Yes, this is Ethan. A pause. Then his face drained of color. What do you mean you found her car? Margaret's hand flew to her mouth as she stood. Ethan listened to the voice on the other end, eyes widening. Where? Is she there? Another pause. Ethan's free hand shook. Okay. I'll come right away. He ended the call with shaky fingers. Margaret moved toward him. Ethan, what happened? He took a breath that barely made it into his lungs. That was highway patrol, he said quietly. They found Claire's car on the side of the old coastal highway. Margaret felt her knees weaken. Was she inside? She asked. Ethan shook his head. No. The car's empty. They don't know where she is. The room fell silent. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the space as the weight of the moment settled over them like a cold fog. Ethan grabbed his jacket, hands trembling. I have to go. Margaret stopped him gently, placing a steady hand on his arm. You're not going alone. He looked into her eyes, desperation swirling with fear. Then he nodded. They stepped toward the door together, unaware that this search would open wounds neither of them knew existed, and reveal truths that would change all three lives forever. Softly, almost to herself, Margaret whispered the words she hadn't shared yet. Please be okay, Claire. The coastal highway stretched along the edge of the cliffs like a cracked ribbon, cutting through mist and morning chill. Ethan drove in tense silence. Margaret sat beside him, hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the winding road ahead. Neither spoke. Not yet. When they rounded a bend, they saw the patrol car first. Lights flashing in slow, steady pulses across the fog. And then they saw Claire's car. A small blue sedan pulled safely into a turnout, facing the ocean. The driver's door closed, windows intact. Nothing broken. Nothing chaotic. Almost as if she had simply parked to watch the sea. Ethan's breath caught. The world tilted slightly. He pulled in behind the patrol car and stopped. A tall officer stepped forward. Are you Ethan Reynolds? Ethan nodded. Yes. This is my mother-in-law, Margaret Turner. The officer nodded respectfully. I'm Officer Hayes. We received a call from a passerby early this morning. Said a parked vehicle looked abandoned. We ran the plates. It matches your wife, Claire Reynolds. Ethan swallowed painfully. Did you search the area? We did a basic sweep, Hayes said. There's no sign of struggle, no indication of an accident. Cars locked but not damaged. Keys were not inside. Margaret exhaled shakily. So she left on her own. Yes, Hayes said. At least, that's how it appears. We'll widen the search along the trailheads. The cliffs here draw a lot of hikers. Ethan's stomach twisted. Hikers, he repeated, trying to keep the fear from his voice. Hayes gave a calm, measured nod. There are several safe paths. People stop here often just to think, walk, or clear their heads. The officer's tone was careful, reassuring. But Ethan knew the unspoken fear that lingered beneath the surface for all of them. He moved toward Claire's car. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and pine. He pressed his palm against the driver's window. Cold glass. No answer. No hint of her warmth left behind. He looked inside. A sweater on the passenger seat. A half-finished bottle of water. One of her notebooks. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. And yet everything was wrong. Margaret stepped beside him. Ethan, she said softly. Look. She pointed to the ground near the turnout's edge. Faint footprints in the dewy earth. Small. Light. Leading toward a narrow trail. The officer walked over. We saw those too, he said. They matched the direction of a viewpoint. Just a 15-minute walk. Ethan didn't wait for permission. I'm going, he said, already moving. Margaret followed immediately. Officer Hayes radioed for backup, then jogged after them. Sir, wait. Please stay within sight. But Ethan couldn't slow down. Every step felt like a heartbeat pounding in his ears. The trail curved along the edge of the cliff, lined with tall grass swaying gently in the breeze. He imagined Claire walking here. Alone. Hurt. Confused. Her mother behind him whispered a quiet prayer he wasn't meant to hear. At the top of the trail, the land opened to a flat overlook. A wide, breathtaking view of the Pacific, waves crashing below with steady force. Ethan scanned every inch of it. Claire, he shouted, voice cracking. Claire. The wind answered, carrying his voice into the open air. There was no one. No movement. Only the vast, indifferent ocean. Margaret's breath hitched. For a moment, she pressed a hand to her chest. Ethan reached for her, steadying her just as Officer Hayes arrived behind them. She's not here, Hayes said, trying to keep his tone level. But the trail branches. She could have turned off earlier. Ethan shut his eyes tightly. Then we search every path. We will, Hayes said gently. But I need both of you to stay safe. We'll coordinate a full team. Ethan stepped back, staring at the horizon. She wouldn't just disappear. She wouldn't. Margaret hesitated, then reached into her pocket. There was no more time to hide what she'd been holding. Ethan, she said quietly, there's something I need to show you. He turned, confused. Margaret held out her phone with trembling hands. Claire messaged me yesterday. Right after she left your house. Ethan froze. What did she say? Margaret's voice shook. She said, she felt she lost herself. That she didn't know who she was with you anymore. The words hit like cold water. Ethan stared at her. Why didn't you tell me? Because she didn't ask for help, Margaret said softly. She asked not to be pushed. I didn't think she was in danger. I just thought she needed time. Ethan ran both hands through his hair, pacing in a tight circle. So she reached out to you. Not me. Not me. She wasn't trying to shut you out, Margaret insisted. She was overwhelmed. She needed space, not abandonment. But she left, Ethan whispered. She left me. Margaret stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. And she came here. To think. Not to vanish. Her voice steadied. I know my daughter, Ethan. If she planned to disappear, she wouldn't have parked neatly, locked the doors, walked a marked trail. This isn't someone running away. This is someone searching for clarity. Ethan's breath trembled. Then where is she now? Margaret looked toward the path below them. She's out here. Somewhere close. The officer's radio crackled before anyone could speak again. Hayes, we found something, a voice said. Ethan's blood turned cold. Hayes grabbed the radio. "What is it?" "Footprints," the voice replied. "Fresh ones. And, we think they match the direction of the lower cliffs." Margaret felt her heart drop. "No," she whispered. Ethan stepped forward, desperation rising. "Take me there. Now." "Sir," Hayes said, trying to maintain order, "we need to be careful." "I don't care," Ethan snapped. "She's out there. I'm not standing here doing nothing." Hayes hesitated, then nodded. "Stay close. Do not run ahead." They started down the trail, the air heavy with dread and hope twisted together. Halfway down, Margaret touched Ethan's arm again. "Listen to me," she said. "Whatever we find, you must hold on to the truth that she loves you. Even if she's lost, she loves you." Ethan didn't trust himself to speak. He only nodded tightly. As they descended, the sound of waves grew louder. Closer. The search team waited near a bend in the cliffside, motioning them over. One pointed toward a lower path that hugged the rocky edge. "Footprints," the man said. "Size matches. Direction leads further down." Ethan followed the direction of the prints. They stretched toward the narrow descent, disappearing into the mist. The officer's voice lowered. "She didn't fall. The trail is safe." She kept walking. Margaret's knees nearly buckled at the relief. But the fear remained. Because if Claire had walked this far, where had she gone next? And why hadn't she called? At the base of the path, a small, weathered wooden bench stood facing the sea. Something rested on it. A small object. Ethan's heart stopped. It was Claire's keychain, the one he had given her on their 5th anniversary. The silver ring glinted softly in the morning light. Ethan reached for it with shaking hands. Margaret brought a hand to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "She was here," Ethan whispered. "She was here." But the bench was empty. The trail ahead stretched into the mist. And Claire was still nowhere in sight. The moment felt suspended, one breath away from hope, one step away from fear. And then, far off in the distance, somewhere through the fog, a faint sound carried on the wind. A voice. A woman's voice. Margaret's eyes widened. "Ethan, did you hear that?" He froze, listening. The wind shifted again. This time, the sound was clearer. Someone was calling for help. The voice was faint, stretched thin by the wind, but unmistakably human. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Claire," he shouted, stepping toward the edge of the trail. Officer Hayes raised a firm hand. "Sir, slow down. Sound carries strangely near cliffs. We need to locate the direction." But Ethan was already scanning the mist, turning toward the slopes below the bench where Claire's keychain had been left. Margaret cupped her hands around her mouth. "Claire, can you hear us?" A long second passed. Then, a faint reply. Weak. Strained. "Help." Margaret's breath broke. Ethan lunged forward, but Hayes caught his arm just in time. "Don't go over the edge blindly," Hayes warned. "You could slip. Let my team assess the terrain." Ethan shook his head violently. "That's my wife down there. I'm not standing still." Hayes nodded to his team. 2 officers moved ahead, checking the narrow downward path that branched off near the cliff face. It was barely visible through brush and fog. One officer called back, "There's a slope. Steep, but navigable. Looks like someone went down recently." Ethan didn't wait another second. He moved around Hayes and started down the rocky incline. Hayes followed close behind, ready to intervene. Margaret held onto the larger rocks for balance, refusing to stay behind. The path twisted sharply. Loose gravel shifted under their feet, but the closer they got, the clearer the voice became. "Please, someone." Ethan's chest tightened. "Claire, I'm coming. Just keep talking." For a moment, there was silence. Then the words floated up, soft and shaky. "Ethan." The sound of his name nearly dropped him to his knees. "I'm here," he shouted, choking on relief and fear at once. "Claire, I'm here." They rounded a bend, and the fog thinned enough for them to see the scene below. And there she was. Claire sat on a narrow ledge halfway down the cliff slope. Not dangerously close to the edge, but close enough that one wrong move would have put her in real danger. Her ankle was twisted awkwardly, her face pale with pain. She clutched her leg with one hand and shielded her eyes from the brightening sun with the other. When she saw Ethan, her breath hitched. She looked exhausted, disoriented, and deeply relieved. Ethan, tears filled her eyes immediately. I slipped. I didn't mean to come this far. I couldn't climb back up. He moved toward her as fast as the terrain allowed, but Hayes kept pace beside him, guiding him to stay careful. When Ethan finally reached her, he lowered himself to the ledge, breath trembling. Claire looked up at him, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to scare anyone." He shook his head, voice breaking. "You scared me because you're my world. That's it. Nothing else matters right now." She swallowed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I just needed to think. I needed quiet. I didn't want to run away. I just felt so lost." Ethan gently touched her cheek. "You could be lost anywhere in the world. I'd still come find you." Behind them, Margaret carefully descended with the help of an officer. When Claire saw her mother, she sobbed harder. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do." Margaret knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from Claire's face. "Oh, sweetheart. You don't have to know. You just have to come home." Claire nodded shakily. Officer Hayes examined her ankle. "It's sprained. We'll help you back up the trail. Take it slow." Ethan stayed by her side the entire way, supporting her weight gently but securely. Every time Claire stumbled, he steadied her. Every time she winced, he whispered, "I've got you. I'm right here." What should have been a 15-minute walk turned into nearly an hour. But eventually they reached the main trail, and from there the turnout where her car waited. When Claire finally sat down on the passenger side of Ethan's truck, exhaustion washed over her. Ethan crouched beside the open door. "Claire," he said softly, "why didn't you call me?" She looked down, twisting the edge of her sweater. "Because I didn't know what I needed. And I didn't want to hear myself say something I couldn't take back." Ethan breathed deeply, steadying his emotions. "You don't have to figure things out alone. Not anymore." Claire lifted her eyes to his, searching his face. "I didn't leave because of you, Ethan. I left because of us. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing my own voice. But when I slipped, when I thought I might be stuck there," her voice wavered. "All I wanted was you." His throat tightened painfully. Margaret stepped closer, her presence warm and grounding. "You're safe now," she said. "And whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Claire nodded slowly. Then she turned to Ethan. "I need time. Not to run away. Not to disappear. Just time to understand how we got here." Ethan held her gaze with quiet intensity. "You can have all the time in the world. But I'm not stepping away again. If you're searching for yourself, I'll walk beside you. Not ahead. Not behind. Beside." Claire's eyes softened, and for the first time in 2 days, she reached for his hand. He held it gently, as if touching something fragile and precious. Officer Hayes closed his notebook and approached. "We'll file this as a non-emergency rescue. I'm glad you're all right, Mrs. Reynolds." Claire nodded gratefully. "Thank you." As the patrol car drove off, the three of them remained by the truck, listening to the distant waves. Claire took a slow breath and looked out toward the ocean. "I didn't come here to disappear," she said softly. "I came here because I felt like I was fading." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Then let's bring you back." Her eyes glimmered with something tender. Something hopeful. Margaret smiled gently. "Let's go home. All of us." They climbed into the truck, the engine rumbling to life. The road ahead wasn't simple. It wasn't solved. But the distance between them had begun to close step by fragile step. As Ethan pulled onto the highway, Claire rested her head against the window, staring out at the waves. Then, quietly, she whispered a sentence that made Ethan's hands tighten on the wheel and Margaret glance back in concern. A sentence that carried both truth and uncertainty. "I don't know if I'm ready to come back home yet." The words lingered in the truck like a thin crack in glass. I don't know if I'm ready to come back home yet. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Not in anger. Not even in panic. Just raw hurt, quiet and unspoken. Margaret felt it from the back seat. Claire felt it too, because she slowly turned toward him. I'm not saying never, she said softly. I'm saying, not today. Ethan nodded once. A slow, steady movement. Okay. Claire blinked, startled. You're not upset. He kept his eyes on the road ahead as the cliffs and ocean drifted past. I'm terrified, he admitted. But I'm not upset. You're safe. That's all I care about right now. She swallowed hard and looked away, tears gathering in her eyes again. They drove in quiet until they reached the town border. The air grew warmer. The fog thinned. Familiar shops and street corners passed by, little pieces of a shared life, scattered around them like breadcrumbs leading home. But home wasn't simple anymore. When Ethan pulled into Margaret's driveway instead of theirs, Claire let out a small, shaky breath of relief. Are you sure? Ethan asked softly. Claire nodded. Just for tonight. Maybe a few nights. I don't want distance forever. I just need to breathe without feeling like I'm choosing the wrong thing. Margaret put a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. You can stay with me as long as you need, sweetheart. Claire leaned into her mother's touch, closing her eyes briefly. Ethan stepped out of the truck and opened the passenger door. He helped Claire down slowly, mindful of her sprained ankle. His hands were careful, steady, warm. Claire watched his face as he guided her to the walkway, his brows drawn with concern, his jaw tight, his heart right there for her to see. She felt something stir inside her. Something she had thought was buried. Margaret unlocked the front door and flicked on the warm yellow lights. Claire stepped inside first, the house greeting her with familiar scents, lavender candles, cinnamon tea, old books. Ethan stood just outside the threshold. Not forcing his way in. Not assuming he belonged there tonight. Claire turned toward him. Thank you, she whispered. For what? He asked. For coming for me. He exhaled shakily. I always will. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two people who had loved for years but forgotten how to show it. Two people standing in the pause between breaking and healing. Margaret watched them quietly, her heart tugged by both hope and worry. Let me make some tea, she said softly, giving them a small bubble of privacy as she moved toward the kitchen. Claire leaned against the doorway, her injured ankle resting on a small step. Ethan, today scared me. Not because of the fall. Because when I sat on that ledge, I realized how far I'd drifted from myself. Ethan stepped closer but didn't touch her. Then let's find you again. Together. Claire shook her head. I don't want you to carry me through this. I'm not trying to carry you, he said quietly. I'm trying to walk the road with you. Her eyes shimmered. What if the road looks different now? What if I'm different? Then I'll love the person you become, he said. Just like I loved the person you were. Claire closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the tenderness in his voice. Ethan, she whispered. I'm scared. So am I, he said. But fear doesn't mean the story's over. It just means the next chapter matters. She looked at him for a long moment. Vulnerable. Searching. Softened. Finally, she reached out and took his hand. A small gesture. A fragile one. But real. Ethan's breath caught. I don't want to lose us, she said. But I need us to change. We can, he whispered. We will. Margaret returned with 3 cups of tea on a tray. She paused when she saw their hands intertwined. A gentle smile touched her lips. Stay for a cup, she asked Ethan. He hesitated. If Claire wants me to. Claire nodded slowly. Yes. Please stay. They sat around Margaret's small kitchen table. Warm tea. Soft lamplight. Quiet breaths. No arguments. No sharp edges. Just 3 people trying to mend something delicate. Claire talked first. Not about blame. Not about anger. But about emptiness. About losing herself in responsibilities and routines. About feeling like she wasn't seen anymore, even though she had hidden parts of herself so well Ethan never had a chance to see them. Ethan listened. Really listened. Then he spoke. About his guilt. About missing the signs. About loving her so much he assumed she'd just know, without him saying the words out loud. The conversation wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest. And honest was something they hadn't had in a long time. Margaret sat quietly beside them, hands wrapped around her tea, letting the warmth seep into her fingers and her heart. She didn't need to fix anything now. They were beginning to fix it themselves. When the night grew late, Ethan finally stood. "I should go," he said. "You need rest. Both of you." Claire stood too, carefully balancing on her good foot. "Ethan," she said softly. He looked at her, worry flickering in his eyes. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. The embrace was gentle, tender, healing. It wasn't a promise of everything solved. But it was a promise of effort. When she pulled back, she placed her hand against his cheek. "Come back tomorrow?" He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Absolutely." He stepped outside into the cool night air. Claire and Margaret stood in the doorway, watching him. Just before he reached his truck, Claire called out to him. "Ethan." He turned. She looked at him with a fragile smile, eyes full of something warm and new and rekindling. "I'm not giving up," she said. "Not on us." He smiled, soft, relieved, full of quiet hope. "Neither am I." As he drove away, the porch light cast a halo around Claire and her mother. Two women who had both saved him in different ways. Inside, Margaret closed the door and took Claire's hand gently. "You're stronger than you think," Margaret whispered. Claire leaned into her mother's shoulder. "Maybe. But today, I didn't do it alone." Margaret kissed the top of her head. "You never have to." And somewhere down the road, Ethan drove home with the keychain in his pocket, the small silver token that had become a promise to start over. Not from the beginning, but from the moment they chose to return to each other. The first step of healing had begun. And it was enough. The end.